Hi everyone, this is my video about what's wrong with true romance. So one of the things I love about TikTok is it will remind you of movies that you like, but you haven't thought of in a decade or two. It got me to rewatch the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk movie. I rewatched all of the Iron Man movies, and then somebody shared a clip from True Romance, and I went to go watch it. It was late. I said, I'm going to watch half of it tonight. I'll finish the rest tomorrow. Man, I watched that whole movie and I was really, really tired. At the end, I was barely making it. But go see this movie. If you haven't seen it, just go see it. One of the most interesting things was to look at a movie that was from a particular period, which was Quentin Tarantino becoming new. He was the hottest thing going, but it took normies about 2 years for them to catch up. Reservoir Dogs made $2 million in the theaters. That was it. But if you go back, and this was pre-internet essentially, if you go back to all the film magazines from 1992, you would think Reservoir Dogs made $200 million. It was just everywhere. Everyone in media was talking about it. Normies had no idea. They don't know what a reservoir dog is. But the excitement of Reservoir Dogs got a major studio to buy one of Quentin Tarantino's script, hire Tony Scott, and hire a bunch of actors and actresses that you know and love to make a movie that made $12 million, which was considered a flop because it basically made as much as it cost. Same thing with Reservoir Dogs. The first two Quentin Tarantino movies either lost money or just barely broke even when they were in the theaters. So after this, you had Natural Born Killers and then Pulp Fiction. And then normies got it. And then Quentin's had the career he had. But this was this weird liminal period where, like, at one point there were 3 biographies of Tarantino on the stands at my local college bookstore. And he would give interviews to literally anyone. So there were dozens, 100 interviews with him per year. So the thing I remember about True Romance from the time is, number one, it was considered a flop. Number two, Quentin liked aspects of it, but him and his fans really didn't like that the ending was changed because it was super badass that Clarence died. It was always Clarence lived in the movie. He died in the script, he lived in the movies. That being said, there's always this thing where people are like, oh, the script was better. I read Quentin's Natural Born Killers script. The movie is much better. One of the things that Quentin did at the time, specifically, is he would write him and his friends into the story, idealized versions of themselves. And he would also write these fantasy girlfriends for himself, essentially. So there was this whole film crew that was a major part of Natural Born Killers that you could tell was supposed to be Quentin and his friends and like a manic pixie dream girl girlfriend of his. And they just took that out. So even though I like Quentin Tarantino, I don't go with that thing that, oh my gosh, you can't change anything. The other thing is this was the beginning of Tarantino speak. A lot of people forget this, but Tarantino had an entire genre for like a decade. Dozens, maybe even 100 movies that just directly ripped him off. Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, 8 Heads in a Duffel Bag. Some of these did okay. Most of them were super flops. A lot of them just went straight to VHS. But he wasn't just an auteur. He was an entire genre for a while. Just as Joss Whedon was incredibly popular, then he was kind of mildly annoying. And now like everyone hates his style of writing. This was only the second movie made with a Tarantino script. So it was all very fresh. And I was like, oh, this is going to be really dated and cringy. Totally holds up. Totally. And I gotta say, this really breaks auteur theory because Tarantino has a very strong writing style. Tony Scott directs a Tarantino script, makes it a Tarantino movie, but also makes it a Tony Scott movie. But just choices he makes, specifically musical choices. There's kind of this repeated musical motif that goes throughout the movie, and you can't put something like that in a script. That's something that a director tells a composer, and they work that out between the two of them. So the movie is about Clarence, who is essentially Quentin Tarantino. He's a guy working at a not video store, a comic book store. He's bright, he's troubled, he's actually really troubled. That's one of my favorite aspects. Usually in stories, the guy's like, oh, shucks, I'm just a regular guy. And then everything is about him just being a regular guy and being in this crazy world. When in reality, Clarence is crazier than everyone. He's more violent. He's just wild. But he kind of has a Peter Parker aspect to his personality where you don't realize he's a lunatic. So Clarence gets set up by an unseen character, Lance, his boss at the comic book shop. He buys him a hooker. It's his birthday. He's alone. The boss is apparently a really cool boss who is never seen at all. And then he has a meet cute with Alabama, who is a prostitute. It's her fourth day, I believe, of being a prostitute. And they have a great time together. In the morning, Alabama reveals that, hey, she has a pimp. He could be a problem. The pimp is Gary Oldman, playing a white Rastafarian. It is one of the great roles in cinematic history. And it's not just a great role. Like this movie, Clarence is a really good character, but he's not the best part. They have several parts that are not just the best parts of the movie, but are some of the best parts in any movies. Clarence confronting Drexel and this back and forth they go through, that's amazing. Dennis Hopper playing Clarence's father, purposefully antagonizing Christopher Walken's mafioso to get him to kill him so that he doesn't get tortured or intimidated into giving away his son's position. That's a fantastic scene. Bronson Pinchot, Brad Pitt as a stoner, even stuff like Michael Rappaport's guileless character. Man, everything in this movie works, and it is just fantastic, fun, crazy. Like Iron Man 1, it has a first hour that absolutely flies by. The second hour is slower. Once they get to LA, it does slow down a bit, but it's still extremely interesting. It's fun, it's funny. It can be heartfelt at multiple times. Although there is a weird thing where Clarence is not a passive character, but he gets written out of the story to let Alabama shine, or even really at the final gunfight, where you kind of feel like he should be in on it. He isn't. He wanders out of a bathroom right into a gunfight and he loses an eye. The cast is absolutely insane, and I have trouble believing that it's real. Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Dennis Hopper, Val Kilmer, Gary Oldman, Brad Pitt, Christopher Walken, Bronson Pinchot, Samuel Jackson, Michael Rappaport, Saul Rubinek. You might not know that name, but when you see him, you know him. He was the author character in Unforgiven. James Gandolfini, Chris Penn, Tom Sizemore. Like, it's actually kind of shocking that this movie wasn't a hit just based on people going to the multiplex in 1993 and saying, oh, I like literally everyone in this movie. People didn't really get Tarantino's style, true romance. They didn't know, like, it doesn't look like a romance. It looks like a shoot 'em up. Like, what's the deal with that? But I would call this movie perfect. I know there's controversy among fans about Clarence should have died. It's a downer story if he dies. That's an edgy writer's thing. You're in your 20s, you write that. Oh, he dies, man. Nobody wants to see that. Once you're older than your 20s, you don't want to see the main guy die. You want him and Alabama to escape with the money and live happy down there in Mexico. I highly recommend this. You don't need to see any other Tarantino movies. I know he always does these little Easter eggs and little connections between his movies, even the ones he didn't direct. You can just jump right into this. Fantastic movie. Thanks for watching. Bye.